Hi everyone and welcome to a new video. As I mentioned in the first week, I wanted to talk about my first 4 marathon experiences today. It's quite a long video, so chapters are marked and lessons which are probably not useful are at the end. I wasn't sure what I wanted this video to be, but as I'm far from the best running example, this video is more storytime based and reflective rather than advice or things you should know. Let's first dive into this week's running and training recap. So it's Sunday evening, and that means another running week has passed. I did 3 runs this week. On Wednesday, I ran 10:82 in 1 hour and 7 minutes. I was nicely on track, but then I decided to push the rest of the runs towards the weekend. So on Saturday, I ran 11 kilometers in 1 hour and 7 minutes. So these 2 runs, I decided to have an occasional fast interval to just work on my speed a little bit, which was nice, and I also felt very fit and energetic during those 2 runs. So now I just returned from my 27-kilometer run and I did it in 3 hours and 22 minutes. So very slow, it wasn't even steady, but I managed to complete the kilometers, which is the biggest surprise because normally the minute I get close to home, I will take a shortcut and go straight to home, but that didn't happen. So at least I almost have a 50k week. So I did cut out a 6.5 kilometer run. Not entirely sure if I would have actually been fit enough to do it, but I would say this was a good week. I wasn't planning to sign up for any more races this winter, but knowing my motivation will dwindle, knowing that I have to do a 30-kilometer run in 2 weeks, I'm probably gonna sign up for a 15k race. Just in case I decide to not run, I at least have 15 kilometers of speed under my belt. So why marathons? I knew that my long-term running goal would be to run marathons. Back then, specifically the expensive ones, like the Walt Disney World Marathon in the form of a Dopey challenge, but also the Great Wall Marathon. I also generally liked going far rather than fast. I did want to respect the marathon distance, so originally my goal was to be in shape for a sub 4 marathon, or at least complete a sub 2 half marathon first. I wasn't fit for either. As doing races have been my biggest running motivator, my running progress kind of fell flat during COVID. I still went out for a weekly run, but I didn't feel like pushing myself as I was also struggling to graduate college. It's a shame as even before COVID I knew that I wanted to do Dopey 2023 and I was already aware that I didn't want that to be my first marathon. Last year in April, I woke up to an email for an early bird discount for the Paris Marathon. Paris has always been a special place for me, and as there was no sign of Run Disney races coming to Disneyland Paris in 2021, I was easily convinced. In my first training video, I joked how I've done so many attempts to train for races. So like I was now for Dopey, I was optimistic I would train my heart out and sign up. My lifetime mileage up to this point was 1,574 kilometers since 2015, which includes 6 times half marathons. I signed up on April 12th, which gave me 6 months to train for my first marathon. In those 6 months, I ran a total of 291 kilometers, which averages over a weekly 10k. I know I'm just as disappointed. I don't even know whether I planned on using a training plan. But to put this period in context, in April to June, my job really killed my running motivation. And in July, I started a new job where I actually talked about being signed up for a marathon. And as my coworkers were quite into endurance sports, I suddenly had an external motivator to the point that in the first week of the job, I ran for the first time in 8 weeks. Races were returning as well, so I quickly found myself at the start of several events. And as my job was quite physically demanding, I still couldn't find the energy to train throughout the week. But I managed 2 30k runs, which I did in 4 hours each with walking breaks. I learned to practice with gels, but other than that, nothing much changed from my normal routine. And due to my low mileage, I relied on my lifetime mileage during the race. Paris Marathon was an absolute blast and the best first marathon I could wish for. It was just great running past some nostalgic places and everything just worked out really. I really wanted to soak up that marathon atmosphere as you can only have one first marathon. Weather was perfect, I hired a GoPro for documenting, I walked when I wanted to, and the on-course refreshments table was an actual feast. Due to my lack of training, I was quite scared of hitting the wall, but I just didn't. The first thought of fatigue showed up at 38 kilometers, but by then I'd already passed the mental and physical hill. I did slow down from 25 kilometers, but I think I was enjoying the on-course snacks a little too much, and obviously I wasn't trained well after all. I ended up running 4:42. Recovering went quick, so I just look back on this race with pure bliss. The medal design was definitely a choice, but confession, after getting tons of Run Disney medals, I've been quite desensitized by medals and my opinions on them. I love this marathon experience and actually started to struggle with half marathons as I've been running the halves for time. So it was not surprising that I would start searching for more marathons in 2022. In November, I signed up for the Rotterdam Marathon, which is pretty much the biggest marathon in the Netherlands. Between Paris and Rotterdam, I ran 245 kilometers, now with one marathon experience under my belt. I had my first injury a few weeks after signing up. It was after my first real sub 2 half attempt, but I really wasn't trained to do so. It was a good lesson learned and I'm really lucky it healed by just resting. I was experimenting with the AI training app Train as One, but as someone who likes to close the loop while running, the workouts felt restricting as I was doing too much if I left my watch running to get home. I really enjoy it though and will maybe return to it next year. I also did a timed 30k in 3:09, a very satisfying improvement compared to the previous two attempts at 4 hours each. But I hit the wall trying to go sub 3 though, so I knew I wouldn't go sub 4 in Rotterdam obviously. Side note, I really liked the Rotterdam Marathon Expo. Kipchoge was apparently signing bibs, so I thought it was quite random that he'd be here, but it was also awesome that he was here. But it was just a signing robot and the queue line was obviously huge. I talked to some organizers from another bucket list marathon, the Arctic Marathon. I feel like I'll impulsively sign up next year, but Walt Disney World and Taylor Swift will probably bankrupt me before I have that chance. But Marathon Rotterdam itself was tough and I was honestly not having a good time. I was not feeling all too well, wasn't wearing the right clothes, it was going to be quite warm and I just wasn't in a good mindset. I'm surprised with the amount of running I managed to do. I only had 2 walk breaks because I was so ready to be done with it. This marathon has probably the most running done between all the marathons. Still, a PR with 4:33 is quite an improvement. A few weeks later, I ran the marathon via Belgica, close to my hometown. Parts of the Netherlands were settling grounds for ancient Rome, and this is still a way for cities to promote tourism. The route was a point-to-point course across the southern part of the Netherlands, going via Belgica, the given name for the route that was used in the ancient Rome period. The fact that this race had that strong theming, I wanted this to be my costumed marathon, partly preparing for January. I wanted to make my own plastic armor, but that fell through. I bought some armor, but that one didn't arrive on time, so I had to make my own from fake leather, which I'm not happy with, but it was passable for the race as I'd rather DNS rather than starting the race without costume. The helmet is my first EVA foam project, which turned out awesome, and during my race I had to adjust my hair as the helmet was a little too big, causing people to think I have very strong jaw as I was holding the helmet with my mouth. People were convinced that this was actually metal. But as you can see, the teeth marks are still there. There were a lot of shaving spots, as expected, wearing fake leather all over. But running in costume is always worth it for me. I knew from the moment I was signing up that I consider this a fun run because of the costume, and this region of the Netherlands is quite hilly. It was also partly trail. Being in a costume in a non-costumed race brings quite a spotlight, so during those races the most important for me is to not embarrass myself. The race itself had more of an ultra and trail vibe. People actually stop at refreshments stations, and the people I met were run streakers or trail runners. Not many runners and supporters. So I had a very slow, less 10k, but it won't stop me from going next year, as 2 days after the marathon, my actual armor arrived. I finished in 4:38, satisfyingly between Paris and Rotterdam. As soon as the registration for Eindhoven Marathon opened in May, I got there as fast as I could, because thirst times the charm, right? This was the time I was going to have a sub 4 and have a 33-minute improvement. I'm giving up suing for the summer and just go out there and beat this. I fell back into the same pattern. I got advanced marathoning by Pete Fitzinger, thinking I could handle the mileage, but I knew I wouldn't. I fully went in knowing I wouldn't be able to complete any of the weeks, but that's also the charm of Pete's plan. He tells you to go out and have a life, flexibility is allowed, but it was obvious that I just don't have that base in me, and I should have bought faster road racing instead. I really want to revisit the plan if I ever get a little more advanced, but this is literally a book people use to run sub 3 marathons, so I'm not quite there yet. In the 4 to 5 months between sign up and the race, I ran 458 kilometers, mainly due to returning events, so at least a big improvement compared to Paris and Rotterdam. I switched from my Kip Run Long 2 to my current trainer A6 Gel Nimbus for that extra push to break PRs. I only did one 30k run, and something else that was quite a bad idea. In September I ran 4 heavy half marathons back to back. I was really chasing the sub 2 half this year. I ran 2:03 in November last year, injuring myself, 2:02 in June, 2:01:32 in July, 2:01:28 on September 11th, and in between a week before that, 2:14 in scorching hot weather, and September 18th it finally happened, 1:55. So that was a goal I was happy to have finally reached. It's also clear that I still don't have sub 4 in me yet. Throughout the marathon training I did get occasionally ill, but the weekly half marathons that I refused to DNS bumped that total training mileage. I was also tired of taking gels, being able to take only one per race, and I started relying on the on-course refreshments, as carrying water was also becoming unnecessary weight. So after a summer of running in hot weather, I was so happy to walk to the start in 3 degrees Celsius. So I felt like I was gonna have a good time, and I actually did. Eindhoven counts down the kilometers left, which is quite satisfying but can mess up your marathon math. I walked through the water stops as I still PR despite walking breaks, and just focused on not hitting the wall. I could hold the 6 minute per kilometer pace until the 30 kilometers and slowed down, but still at least got sub 4:30 by running 4:25. I am now officially faster than Oprah. I had a long break afterwards, which brings me up to this video series, preparing for the Dopey challenge in January. Since the course itself was quite plain, I feel neutral about this race, but running wise it was a very good experience. I thought Eindhoven was another big marathon here, and it is the 3rd biggest of the Netherlands, but there's such a huge drop between Amsterdam and Rotterdam compared to Eindhoven. For those that don't do more than 2 marathons a year, it's an easy choice to go to Rotterdam in spring and Amsterdam in fall. But regardless of that, it was a good time. So my conclusion, it's all personal. I think this is also a good disclaimer to start off, because everyone approaches a marathon differently. Some train their heart out for a 6-hour finish. Some run a sub 3 on their first attempt. I just run a half marathon per week to finish 4:30. It took me a long time to get over imposter syndrome. I do feel like an average runner. My personal checkpoints were sub 30 minutes 5k, sub hour 10k, sub 2 hour half, and sub 4 marathon. And obviously sub 4 marathon isn't quite there yet. While I love catching PBs, I do dislike that painful grind necessary for a sub 20 minute 5k or a Boston qualifier. Honestly, my only motivation to improve my half marathon times is to get a better placement in Disney corrals. And I'm taking advantage that I'm still young, my body recovers quickly, and there's no rush as long distances are known to peak later in life. Which brings me to the next point. I just want to be able to enjoy running and all those chaotic challenges and niches. I feel embarrassed to not train enough, but forcing it would also just lead to resentment and pain. I can't wait to be running in costume again in December, January, February, and May. And I have so many races on my bucket list to work through in the next decade. On the other hand, I also know that training will increase my joy during the race itself, so that's something I'm still trying to work on. And because I prefer distance over time, I am dabbling in ultras and trail running to keep this sport sustainable for me. I was someone who hated running, but there are so many possibilities to make it fun, whether it was a color run that were advertised everywhere or the biggies like UTMB. So before running marathons, I'd already have the same pattern with half marathons, in which I sign up, the motivation disappears quickly. So with this whole series, at this point, I'm just trying to figure out my mistakes and to discover how to break the chain, which are mostly wrong training plans, struggling to balance multiple hobbies, little accountability tools, and just the lack of energy. I just hope to improve these points. I'm trying to focus for 12 weeks of volume rather than 18 weeks of attempted workouts, doing upgrades to make each hobby more efficient, and also just loosening deadlines. I'm making videos to have weekly check-ins, and sleep and diet are on the back burner, but should be prioritized if I'm going on 18 to 20 mile runs. As my lifetime mileage is increasing, it also becomes easier to work on getting better at running. I used to take month-long breaks because starting again was scary. And now, despite calling myself undisciplined, there have been only 6 weeks of the 43 this year where I didn't run at all. So that's improving. So running and racing more helps also nailing down on fueling and racing strategy. I ate a bunch of gels for the first 3 marathons, but like I said, I already feel quite done with them. I've learned that I love fruit during the race, and carrying a water bag is not worth the weight and heat. During a 4-day event in May, I managed to PR my 10K walking through the water stop while getting too warm carrying water in half marathons and running past the stops. Me being a cheapskate would also not pay for bag drop, but especially in colder weather, it's just worth it to leave extra weight at the start and not freezing on my way home. I thought getting a new running vest was also an upgrade, and it probably is for future longer races, but my old lighter one is much better for fast races. I know it's not recommended, but I love improving my time on the distance by repeating the distance, which probably explains why I just keep doing marathons and half marathons, and how I look positively back to my 30-day 5K challenge in 2019. Summer running is not for me. Summer is not for me. I've never enjoyed warm weather as an adult. I love the extra daylight, and running in hot weather makes running now in the fall much easier, but it's simply pure torture. I'm already planning to do little to no running in summer 2023 to give myself some rest and to focus on sewing and other hobbies. I've been working full-time over a year now, but I'm still struggling to balance everything. So just knowing I don't have to be doing everything the whole year is a refreshing thought. I love the idea of doing a fall marathon next year to run sub 4, but I just can't handle the heat. This leaves me potentially to a proper sub 4 marathon attempt in spring if I can properly get through this training cycle. I'll be doing my first ultra marathon in March and marathon via Belgica in May, so I do have something in mind for April. I'm not promising anything, but I would love to get a big PR before next summer. So that's a full review of my marathon experiences. It may have been too rambly or boring, but it's cathartic, honestly, to get this all out. Again, this is just my experience, not recommended to run 10 to 20 kilometers per week leading up to a marathon, but it worked for me, and I hope to properly train this season. I hope I'm clear that I'm trying really hard to up my mileage. I know I'm gonna say that in every video and it will get annoying, but maybe that's the key to success.